one, I want to make sure that you know that there is hope. And whether it's workaholism, whether it's sex addiction, whether it's overeating, like I just want anyone who's got compulsive behavior to know there is hope. And then the second piece, which really gets to the core of your question, is how do we cope? Is we can't do it alone. And
welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I'm super glad that you're here with us today because I'm here with my most amazing guest, David. David, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited.
Nice. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
I'm Coach David J. Greer. I'm a 40-plus year entrepreneur, and now I'm a professional business coach, and I facilitate strategic planning for entrepreneurs and their senior leadership teams.
Nice. So let's back up the bus a bit. How did you get into coaching and working with senior leadership as your thing?
So I have a long career, which we can get into if we want, but the last kind of executive gig I did was a VP of marketing for a publicly traded $35 million a year company called WebTech Wireless in the telematics space. And, I was working with the CEO who I knew well, also on strategy. And I came out of, 3 years at WebTech, and I was in my mid-50s, and I realized that I did not have to prove to anyone anymore that I can work hard. I probably worked as hard in those 3 years as I had any time in my whole career.
Wow.
And if we back it up a little bit, I came out of a company I was with 20 years and took a break and tried a few things, and they weren't working for me. And on my 50th birthday, I hired an amazing coach, Kevin Lawrence. And I worked with Kevin for 9 years. And so when I came out of the gig with WebTech Wireless, I just decided that I wanted to give to entrepreneurs the kind of things that Kevin had given to me. And that was kind of the catalyst to becoming a coach. And of course, the gifts that Kevin has given to me is much bigger than business. So I'm an alcoholic who's thankfully been in recovery for the last 15 years. And when Kevin came into my life, we worked on a lot of, trying to reestablish my career, and we cleared off a lot of clutter on the table. And 18 months after working together, he was the first person I admitted I had a drinking problem to. And he coached me to go to 12-step recovery. And that has been the linchpin of my getting and staying sober. So when I say I want to give the gifts that Kevin gave me, I feel one of the gifts Kevin gave me, of the many, many gifts he's given me, is the gift of sobriety. And that's also why, I do specialize in entrepreneurs who are challenged with alcoholism or addiction.
Nice. Well, let's touch on that, because I think it is post-COVID, it's a more prominent issue than I think it's ever been before. And because it is a socially acceptable coping mechanism, and when people are undergoing a ton of stress, you need to cope. So how do you go and cope when, so talk
and there's
to me
this convenient, socially acceptable way that you can,
I think I'll just
cope.
and then it works until it doesn't, like everything else. So what is it kind of particularly about that you got out of it? So not to kind of dwell on it so much as to kind of realizing that there's this thing that's taking over my life and it's not fun anymore. Like, what was that transition point, and what did you get out of that, out of becoming sober?
Yeah, so it took 20 years of denial. So I just was in complete denial about my alcoholism for a very, very long time. And let's be clear, I'm a super high-performing alcoholic. So from the outside, I can drink a lot, I don't stumble, I don't slur, and, I do a lot of stuff, including running businesses. So from the outside, I look like I have it together, but I reached a point kind of with Kevin's help and reflection, like he had no idea I was drinking, right? But just as we worked together as a coach and a client, I just reached that point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like that was my bottom. When I came into recovery, I had a house and 3 kids and a couple cars, and 15 years on, I've got a house and a marriage and 3 kids and 2 grandkids and a couple cars. And you might say, I don't, nothing looks different on the outside. And you'd be right. It doesn't look that much different on the outside, but on the inside, I'm like 100% different human being.
And I have to guess that your wife and kids appreciate that too.
Yeah. Although my wife was very surprised when I came out as an alcoholic. So,
Wow.
For partly because when she grew up, alcoholics were truckers or loggers, and they went to the bar on Friday night and they got really drunk and into really bad fights. And I didn't do that. So if I didn't do that, I must not be an alcoholic.
Well, yeah, you ran companies.
Yeah, right.
Could you possibly? That's the pinnacle of what everybody wants. What are you talking about?
Right. So
Right?
I didn't meet her definition, and it's actually been a struggle for her, because one of the promises she made to herself is she'd never marry an alcoholic.
Of
And
course.
then, 30 years into our relationship, surprise.
Ta-da!
So there we are. So and here we are today, where I've managed to put 15 years together one day at a time. So
Nice. And what would you say is the best part of sobriety for you?
going to the swimming pool with my 2 grandchildren, my daughter and son-in-law and wife on Sunday for Father's Day, and being sober.
Nice.
And my grandchildren have never seen me drunk.
Nice. Nice. And if you don't mind, I'll pick it a little bit more. Why
Sure,
not drunk?
go for it.
Why not drunk? Because some people go like, who cares? I'm just having a drink. And I really want to kind of like, what was it about Father's Day, being able to spend it with them sober, that was the pinnacle of importance to you? Because I want people to see what that thing is that they might be missing out on.
So it's even on my, it's on my website. One of my core values is family values, like being with and having family. And, when I was a high-performing alcoholic, but when I was drinking, I don't know what exactly I took away from the relationship with my kids. Like, I still was there. I still did a lot of things with them. I still went to sports games, but 20 or 30% of me was not there, because it was either thinking about the next drink, or I was already had a lot of drink in me. So to me, the commitment I've made to myself and to the people around me is that I'm going to be 100% present. Like, I'm not going to use any artificial substance to get between me and the experiences that I'm having in life.
Nice. And so being there,
that's kind of that's like the overreaching, how I want to show up, how I want to be in the world. And with all that goes with that, because, sometimes life is still painful, even though I'm very successful. I'm human and stuff happens. And I can't go back to my solution of choice, which is to pick up a drink. So, fortunately, I have a lot of tools that I can use to cope with life on life's terms.
So let's get into that. What are some of those tools? Because as I mentioned earlier, I see it as a coping mechanism. And I think people need to understand that there are thousands of coping mechanisms, and any one of them can become problematic if it becomes the crutch.
Agreed. So, there's a message I have if you are suffering from, alcoholism or use of drugs is, one, I want to make sure that that there is hope. And whether it's workaholism, whether it's sex addiction, whether it's overeating, like, I just want anyone who's got a compulsive behavior to know there is hope. And then the second piece, which really gets to the core of your question, is how do we cope? Is we can't do it alone. And, alcoholism to me is a disease of isolation. Certainly was my experience. I tended to isolate when I drank. And my experience with entrepreneurs, even if they don't use alcohol as a coping mechanism, is, we start our businesses and we're pretty headstrong, and, because we see an opportunity or because we hate working for other people. But on the whole, like, we're self-driven, we're self-powered. And so it's really hard to ask for help. And so I see a lot of entrepreneurs who need my help, but they're not open to it. I can't help you if you're not open to it, right? So I think the first coping mechanism is don't try and do it all alone. Find a peer group, find some mentor, Like if you don't have money for a coach, like again, find someone more experienced with you that you can talk through issues with. So that I think is one of the big coping mechanisms. I think some of the other coping mechanisms are the ones that we all talk about ad nauseum because they are so important. Like, did you get enough sleep? Are you eating well? Do you exercise? I mean, exercise has always been a really big part of my life and how I coped, even with alcohol. Even if it was to get over my hangover, I still exercise first thing in the morning.
It works.
Yeah, it worked. Yeah. And, you know, everything from breath work, which I encourage people to do. It's amazing when you take 5 breaths in a stressful situation, how a better answer shows up.
Right.
The hardest part is remembering to take 5 breaths.
Exactly.
In the moment when you're fearful, agitated, angry. And what's really strange is if you take 5 breaths, people just think you're thinking about the issue. Like there's no judgment. It's not like, oh, you took so long to answer. It's right. They don't need to know that's what you're doing. You're actually trying not to think, just to like take the internal temperature down when, especially when we're being really reactive or we're being triggered.
Absolutely. One of my favorite was I had a client once who was totally stressed. He's like, I can't breathe when I'm stressed. I said, okay, great. Then hold your breath, but count to 5 and then take the deep breaths. It's like you're not allowed to rant, but you can hold your breath and, you know, just force it to count to 5 and then count to 5. And
even if it's through gritted teeth,
right?
Just do the count to 5.
Like you're gonna lose your mind anyway, so why not just hold your breath for that 5 seconds? And then when he started doing that, it was like then he could stop in his brain and then, oh right, I'm doing this thing. Okay, now I'm gonna breathe 5 breaths. Oh, okay, now I can actually see some options. This is very cool. And it really is about being able to stop our primary go-to reactions and allow ourselves to use that functional part of our brain, the creative part, the resourceful part, all of those things that, to your point, are there when we're clear and sober and in the moment, that wouldn't necessarily be there. All of our faculties aren't necessarily working for us without them.
Yeah, and the way I state it, like simply, is learning how to give a response instead of a reaction.
Nice. So let's get into kind of the techniques you use and how you work with your clients, what kind of problems they're facing. I'm going to ask you 28,000 questions. Feel free to answer this the way you want to. So what does it look like kind of when you're working with your clients? What's your primary outcome?
So the primary outcome is defined by the client.
Nice.
So, you know, people usually approach me because they've got some sort of challenge or problem in the business, or they're in crisis, right? And obviously, if they're in crisis, then we just go attack the most immediate problem. If it's more like a general, I'm not happy with the business, I don't like how people work for me and they don't do what I ask them to do, or like however that's showing up for them in their business. What I do is I have an intake form that asks some questions like, you know, what do you want in 6 months? What do you want in 12 months? What do you want in 18 months? Because it's a good chance they've never written down any goals for their business or for their life. And then, you know, I ask them, like, what are you looking for in a coach? And what are you not looking for in a coach? And I just use that to inform me, like, going forward, and then, you know, usually we just start with your 6-month goals and, you know, like, where are you at? Like, you wrote this down as a goal. Why is it important to you? What are you stuck on? And then, you know, we just start working through that, you know, call by call. And I look for my typical coaching setup is 2 1-hour calls a month and a minimum 3-month commitment. Like you never get anywhere with a coach or a therapist, I don't think, in like one call or one meeting, right? Like you can, like, you gain insights.
Problems?
Yeah, but it's a process. So, and the other thing I do is I always get new clients to take Strength Finders. Strength Finders is a book and a process where you go answer a bunch of questions. And the assertion of the book is there's around 42 or 46 strengths. I forget the exact number. And when you take their questionnaire, out pops like your 5 top strengths. And so I get clients to do that, and then I review it so I know where their strengths are, where they're coming from. And my coaching model is I coach to strengths, not weaknesses. Because I think you can work for a year and make us, take a strength from a 3 to a 4, and you won't move the needle in anything. Whereas you can take a strength that it's 98.5 and we can work on it and get it to 99, and it'll actually massively change your life or your business. The other thing is when we're operating in our strengths, we're usually doing so unconsciously, and there's usually a downside to being in that strength at all times. Like I would say a third of my clients' competitiveness is their number one strength. And I say, how's that working out with your wife? And, for some, it's like their eyes just like pop open because they just didn't realize. And they probably married someone who's pretty competitive too, right? There's a match there. And like just this realization that a lot of what they're doing is actually competing.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be just life-changing in terms of, I mean, it still shows up. I had a client recently, been a client for 3-4 years. Sounded like you're competing with so-and-so. Oh shit, you're right.
Right. It's a good coping mechanism until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. So again, all of our strengths are beautiful until they're not. So some awareness of when like going too far might not work for you. And so again, it's just really working towards goals, finding the blockages in the goals. And then a lot of, I believe, coaching work is digging into belief systems. Like a lot of the deeper blockages are some deep belief system you have about yourself or the world or money, that, you need to go down in there and have a kind of deep look at that. So I help people when they're ready to go have a deeper look at those aspects. And then like, is that belief serving you in the life you want to live and the business you want to create today?
So let's talk about that, building the strengths and the dichotomy of kind of building the competitiveness. So obviously competition in business is a fantastic motivator, driver. It does phenomenal things until you're using it unconsciously against the people that you don't really want to compete with.
Or you've your senior leadership team, they're all competing against each other instead of collaborating with each other.
Right. So how do
Because
you
you
hone
hired
that?
people like you.
Right?
Right.
And that's kind of silly. So how do you hone it in so that it becomes instead of a go-to reaction, that it becomes a functional kind of a laser beam as opposed to just a echo everywhere?
So I would say a lot of it still is just bringing awareness to the individual. And sometimes, so oftentimes if they're willing, I'll go through the strengths with them. We'll talk about like the downsides if you're acting too strongly in it. And then, the clock moves forward for 6 months. We're in a different situation. We're trying to deal with an issue, and I'll bring it back to, well, do you think you're working in this strength? And do you think it's working well for you in this moment on this issue? And it's again, just constantly raising that awareness, which for all of us, the way I like to describe it, if in that react versus response. So in a lot of the personal growth work I've done, it's like, a day later, I catch that response I didn't want to have. And then a different situation, I catch it an hour after it happens. Then I catch it a minute after it happens. And then there's like this incredible day where I catch it a quarter of a second before it's about to happen, and I actually don't react. Right? Like it's a process. It's like it, because these things are baked into us so deep. It takes a lot of self-awareness and personal growth and work to actually get to a point where we can actually be aware that like this is what's happening to us. And none of it is kind of an overnight kind of change, like most personal change. And I work with clients, like, again, it's always, as a coach, I'm always trying them to really focus on where do you want to go? Where do you want to get to? What's the outcome that you're looking for? And then these things show up as blockages or stucks or things that are getting in the way of what they really want.
So I want to talk about kind of what are some of the strengths that people have. But before we do that, why do you think people don't recognize the strengths that they have? Why is it just kind of a,
Because I think it takes quite a bit of courage, in my opinion, to go do this kind of self-examination. It's not like the norm. It's not, I don't think it's really taught in school. Um, like again, we tend to be driven by outside events.
right?
And, our parents, depending on, the kind of parents you have, but for a lot of us, it's like you're going to go to university and, like that's how you be successful. And
Mm-hmm.
you respond to that by doing what your parents want, even though maybe you know in your heart that that's not like the right path for you because you're really an artist or creative or something else, right?
Right.
So I just always, anyone who's working on their personal growth and listening today, I want to applaud your courage because I think it's a courageous step to do this work.
Oh, yeah. I
And I,
was having
and I
a
don't know if I
conversation.
answered your question because I've forgotten what the exact question
Absolutely, you did.
was.
So I think people they get embarrassed that they have strengths, or they've been shunned by them. Like I said,
Yes.
everybody has strengths. You look at little kids. I love 2-year-olds. They're my favorite. The ones that everybody else gets frustrated with are my absolute favorites. But you can see them. It's like, oh, you can dance. Wow, you're hilarious. Wow, you can
Yep.
really do that. You're really smart. And everybody's told in school, you shut up, sit down, be quiet. And all of those strengths and characters are muted so that the parent can take care of their kids and get on with the day and go to the
Yeah, or the
appointment on
teacher can
time,
teach a
or the
class of 20
teachers,
individuals or 30 individuals, all who are different.
right? Like it just becomes too much as an adult. We're like, just stop, shut up,
Yes.
quiet, and do your thing. I totally get that too. And so that when the dancer sees that they can dance and they're embarrassed by it because somehow they feel like they really shouldn't be, all that in a bag of chips, then it becomes hard to kind of express that. And in business, I think it can kill a business if the CEO or senior doesn't recognize that they're good at what they're doing.
Yes, and then I have a certain number of clients, and my former coach Kevin Lawrence, like are ADHD. Like
Mm-hmm.
going into business is often a really great coping mechanism for those that have ADHD.
Right.
Like you're kind of setting yourself up for success in some ways because the constant demands for attention are always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And as my former coach Kevin Lawrence used to say, like the insight for him was when he finally realized that was him. Like he's ADHD. It explained a lot of things. Suddenly a lot of things made sense. But his wife is like, shh, shh, don't say that. Don't tell people.
Don't encourage
Like,
that behavior.
yeah. And Kevin's like, to the heavens, like I'm I finally figured it out.
Right.
This is
I,
who I
I love
am.
ADHD. I think it's awesome to be able to deal with. And it's just being able to hone in on, as long as you can keep track of the tracks that you got going on, it's
Yeah,
fantastic.
Kevin has a great model. He says, I'm a triangle operating in a world of circles. And and so the key for me is to make sure that I have other processes or people around me who, if you draw a circle and then you have a triangle inside it, so if the listeners can imagine that, and
Mm-hmm.
then you think about those pieces of the circle that are not filled in, like you find ways to fill that in with other people or processes so you can be a whole circle in a circle world, but you are still the triangle.
Well, and I wish so many people would realize that in business. I think in big business, it makes sense. You have a marketing department, you have a legal department, you have a fulfillment department, and everybody kind of, well, of course, you're going to be creative in the creative department. That's your job. Of course, you're going to be this. In smaller companies, if they don't have the resources or they don't have the wherewithal to be able to make those departments yet, they oftentimes will say things like, I just need a mini me. I just need somebody that can do what I do to take over the thing. And they don't realize that they are the Renaissance people that can
Mhm.
touch the three corners. Nobody else can. You need to have other people that have that specialty. The creatives can do the creative, the thinkers can think, the doers can do, and etc. But
Yeah, one thing I do coach around and see quite a bit is,
mhm,
owner founders started a business basically, like you say, like they had to do everything because otherwise the business wouldn't happen. Like, and so then they grow a business and they get customers and then it starts to grow and then, they start to hire people. And, eventually then the business has the tiger by the tail because they're just responding to the next fire. And this aspect of letting go, or a lot of times it shows up as, well, the people I hired, they don't do as I say. And I'm like, well, what are you telling them? Like it's the letting go of control after you've had control of everything, because that was the only way to make it work. And now you have people around you who are better marketers. And so you've got to go let them market. Like, and the way that they do it may look completely different than the way you did it, and it doesn't make them bad or wrong. They don't have to do it your way. Like that's a lot of the letting go I find of an entrepreneur that's growing, that business is growing, is they also are scared to hire people that are better than themselves. Well, then what am I here for? Which, you're there because you're taking all the risk, you put in the money. You're the leader, you have a vision of the market and what the strategy is and how to go attack it. And that's by far and away the most valuable thing you can bring to the table. And again, you're taking all the risk, so you deserve the majority of the rewards. And so you should try letting go some of these things. And these smart people that you've hired, you should let them do their stuff, because they will do it better than you, and you'll have better outcomes, and it'll all be good, but you'll have to let go.
Nice. So let's talk about some
not micromanage them.
Right. So let's talk about some of the strengths that people have that they don't necessarily recognize when they're taking their strength finder.
Oh, I'd have to almost get the book out and glance through it. Well, like, one of mine I probably was aware of, but one of my top strengths is I'm what's called an activator. Like, so I can get other people to do things, which if you're a coach, that's a pretty helpful skill to have, right? Because I can help my clients to get stuff done. I mean, if you ask me what am I master at, one of the things I'm a master at is getting stuff done. I have an amazing taskmaster spirit who can do amazing things. And I can help my clients with that. And, I also help them be accountable. That's again about that alone piece, right? Like if you're doing it all alone as an entrepreneur, there's no one really holding you accountable. So that can be very challenging if that's not one of your strengths, is like getting things done or holding yourself accountable. Another strength, I forget what it's called, but it's, it's basically like you get along with everybody. And that can be really good unless you need to fire someone. Like, and then you're, that part of your strength, like you like to like people and get along with them and be part of, and it's a good chance you might be a people pleaser too. So then, it's hard for you to let someone go because maybe they won't like you. Well, they probably won't like you, but you still need to let them go.
Exactly.
And then another one that I see quite a bit is woo. And that's the ability, like literally to go in a room and just get anyone to listen to you and like you. And people who with really strong woo, like they can work a whole network room and meet 50 people, but they're usually almost useless at follow-up. So, again, this is where you need an executive assistant. So you take everyone's business card, you do make sure you write down on the back of the card what you promised to that person. Oh, I'll connect you with so-and-so, or I'll send you this paper, whatever it is. And then like the next day you hand it to your EA, and she or he like looks after all the things that you said. So it's not that the strength is bad, it's just that it tends to come with these other behaviors. So people meet you, they like you, they think you're a great person, and then like, oh, but you're fluff because you never follow through. You don't, because wooers really like the next new relationship. They're not as much about, building deeper relationships. Yes. And again, there's no judgment. Like it's
fun.
That's what you're good at. And 99% of the people, that entrepreneurs that I work with and know, would love to have like 5% of your woo.
Exactly. Anybody who's ever gone to a networking event and stood at the door and went,
maybe I should just turn around and go home.
Exactly. And just a little sparkle of that woo, I'd be fine.
Would go a long ways. Yes, indeed.
Awesome. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you about a Cinderella story of one of your clients. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
Awesome. So I'm super excited to hear about a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
Sure. I want to share with you my first facilitation client, who's still a client today. In fact, I facilitated their quarterly plan yesterday. So 3 partners, and kind of one of the partners heard about me through my network and hired me to come in and facilitate a 2-day annual planning session. And we did that. We went off site and got the 3 of them together, and I worked in my process, and we came up with the plan. And part of what I create is a plan that has a short list of goals for the year and for the quarter, and it's actually written down, which a lot of entrepreneurs have goals, but they don't write them down, and they often have too many. So advance a quarter, and I follow up to find out what happens. And it turns out one of the other partners, came to me and said, with your work and having everything written down, we had suspected for a year that this other partner, wanted to go expand outside of Canada, wanted to do this. And we had been clear from the start that as in our partnership, that's not where we were prepared to go in the first 5 years. And so they actually dissolved the partnership, and 2 went off on their own. And the one went off to do his thing, and he did open office in London 6 months later.
Oh.
So I feel like I act as obviously they did all the work, they did the breakup, they figured out how to create 2 companies, but I feel like I was the catalyst that crystallized, when it was so clear and written down in the goals, and this third partner just didn't do anything that he said in the goals list, nothing. And the other 2 went on, and they're a private equity firm, and I can't share their financials because that's confidential, but
they're happy and doing well.
Yeah, well, let's just say the size of their fund when I started with them, they are now 8 times that size of assets under management.
Nice.
In 8.5 years.
Nice.
So
that's awesome. Well, and you can tell that there's the tension was there. And when partners aren't going after the same goals and dreams and ambitions, you start dividing your resources, and your resources start to go into, no, you have to see things this way. And those 3 words or 5 words, whatever it was a waste of time when they could have been spent moving the business forward. So oftentimes I find in coaching, it's so much better to be able to just give people permission to do the thing that they fear doing. It's oh, but we're not going to live without this guy. Well, yeah, you are. And actually he's going to do fabulous and wonderful too. And so be it. Go.
And you'll all be better. And everything will get better.
Right?
Right.
I loved that part. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you, especially those of a 3-way partnership. But sorry, you may have cursed yourself on that one. You're going to get.
I might.
No. How did they start that journey with you?
So if you want to learn more about me, you can just visit my website, coachdjgreer.com, which is Coach D as in David, J as in James, Greer.com. And contacting me is easy. Every one of my web pages on the top has my email and my phone number. And I do want listeners to know I offer free 1-hour coaching. So if you are stuck on an issue as an entrepreneur and would like some help to talk through it, to work on it, I'm happy to spend an hour with you, on the phone or on Zoom. And, my promise to you is if you spend 1 hour with me, you'll have 3 ideas to accelerate your business in the next 90 days.
Nice. I love that. And I also think it's particularly funny that you DJ Gear to me now. I just hit my brain.
Yeah. And then, if that's too much for you, I also wrote a book that took my entrepreneurial experiences, and then I interviewed over 50 other people, and I include 10 case studies. A third of the book is actually other people's stories. And I break down business into what I call 10 strategic areas. And in my experience, owner founders of businesses are typically really good at 4 of them, have some awareness, and are doing okay in 4 of them, and 2 they have no idea about. And I wrote the book to be a learning resource, but also like it's, if you're stuck, you pull the book from the shelf, assuming that you go for old-fashioned paper books. And I wrote an extensive index. Like, you look in the index, you find the issue you're troubled with, you go read 3, 5, 6 pages, and you'll have at least one idea to like what to do next. So that book is Wind in Your Sails: Vital Strategies that Accelerate Your Entrepreneurial Growth. And that is also on my website.
Nice. You can pull it off the digital bookshelf.
Yes, and you can have an Audible version too, if whatever works for you.
Love it. We'll, of course, have all of David's links in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down, click on those links, open them up in a new browser, because we're not done yet. So, David, I get to ask you, at what point in life did you know that you were a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's actually a tricky question, because I'm in university. I'm in 4th year in computer science. I've worked with this consultant on a really big project for 2 years, and decide when I graduate, I'm going to join his, well, in fact, before I graduated, I joined his young software company as the first hire after the founders. It was Robert and Annabelle, and they named their company Robel, the concatenation of their 2 names. And I liked the place. And after 10 years, I bought out Annabelle, became partners with Bob, and then, roll forward to the 20-year mark. And it was probably the 18 or 19-year mark. And I'm like, still, when I traveled overseas and it has, what's your occupation? I put computer programmer. And finally, I brought in some outside marketing people, some outside strategy people, and I kept looking at them and I'm saying computer programmer. And they kept holding up the mirror and it said entrepreneur. And it turns out that I was probably an entrepreneur by, well, even after the first year. Like, I was at trade shows and I was giving demos, and I mean, my former partner and I, for 20 years, we wrote a paper every year and gave it to management and technical audiences. And anyways, I just didn't think of, so, I was an entrepreneur in my early 20s, but I just didn't think of myself that way. I was having too much fun, solving problems for people in this particular niche computer area. And, I'd go to trade shows, I'd listen to their problem, and then I'd say, would you pay me money if I could go home and do that and send it to you in the next month? And they'd say, yeah, I would. Okay. So I'd go home and I'd program it up and I'd send it to them and say, now you're going to send me money? And half the time, of course, they'd say no, because they didn't really mean it. But I learned, and so did Bob. And, we built a really, really successful niche software company.
Nice.
And that's how I became an entrepreneur.
Love that. I liked it so much about the company so that I could work there.
Yeah.
And not have a boss. Yeah.
Yeah. That is why I bought it at Annabelle. And to make a lot more money too, which I did.
I love it. You've been absolutely awesome. Any last words for our peeps?
No, just have fun on the journey. Like, Michelle and I have had a lot of laughs today, and I really encourage that. One of the things when I was running Robel is, if I went past the boardroom, like if I knew we were dealing with a really sticky issue, and people were meeting in the boardroom and I went by and everybody was having a laugh, I 100% knew it was going to work out okay. Like, it's not that there wouldn't be a challenge, and that it would be somewhat stressful, but it's okay. Like, we're having a laugh, we're going to figure it out. And so I hope you have a laugh today in your business, because it should be fun. You should enjoy it. Enjoy the journey. And if it's not, then ask yourself, why not? And one of the most important questions I often ask entrepreneurs who've been in business for a while is, why'd you start your business? Because I think as the business grows, that's the easiest thing to get lost, is like the original reason why you started the business. went down on this journey. And sometimes you have to rediscover it as your business grows and changes, and revisit that. So I always think it's a good reminder.
David, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I know how valuable it is.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.